Anyway, let's make a start. One of the things we know we don't have an answer. One of the things we know we can do is try and increase what we do, and we believe that those merits help people. So we can think of it like that, and our learning helps the soldiers somewhere. Someone fighting in Gaza. You know, you have to hold. It's very important to hold on to that. You know, so a video someone sent of the laning today in laning. I don't know what today, yesterday in Gaza. Let's say the Torah and they were laning. Yeah, must have been this morning. Or this afternoon. Maybe they had a goal. Okay. I think we got to the bottom of the Omas. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Who got?
Yeah.
Mem
base, Omid base. The bottom of the Omid, yeah. It says, Umeidin zelozeh. They testify for each other. Now, what that means is that Shutvin, you have partners, they're allowed to testify for each other. And that's a chiddush because that's what I was going to try and understand. You know, this is basically going back to a list of 3 statements that Shmuel made. Shmuel said 3 things about Shutvin, about partners. Number 1, these are partners who, for example, jointly own a piece of land, right? Number 1, he says they can form a chazaka against each other, right? Because he can say, why didn't you object? You know, okay, we were partners, right? You were partners together. You should have objected to me, you know, and the fact that you didn't means it's a proof that I own it. That's what we dealt with last time. And the whole last sugya was basically working out how that works, because really, you know, does it mean that do you form a chazaka when there's no one there? When he hasn't been different versions of how to understand it. Where does that mean where he's using the whole land, or he's only using part of it? You know, how you can form a chazaka. But the second statement that Shmuel made was, Umeidin zelozeh, they can testify for each other. So the top of the next Omer, the Gemora says, Amai, why should this be? Very simple and basic question. Nogein beidus onhein. A basic disqualification of eidus is you cannot testify for someone if you have a vested interest in the eidus. If you stand to gain, you stand to benefit from eidus, the eidus that you're giving, right? Then you're automatically disqualified as an aid. That's why you can't, in any case. You're Nogeh B'Dova, precisely, right? And Rashi explains why the Nogeh B'Eidus. Let's look at the Rashbam. So look at the top of the Omud. Amai, Midin Zalzeh. Why can they testify one for each other? Nogeh Midus Onhein. They are Nogeh B'Eidus. The Kolzman Shleichol Kula Gamrei, as long as they haven't split completely. Im Yitol Shum Ma'arer Klum Min HaSodeh. If any person who is questioning the situation takes klum min hasoda, takes anything from the field, yafsidu shneyan, right? They will both lose out. In other words, what is the situation now? The situation is 2 people jointly own a piece of land. So obviously, if the person who claims it's his comes along, right, and basically wins in court and takes a part of the land, right, what's going to happen? They both lose. I'm testifying for myself. You understand? I'm getting up. Basically, this guy is being taken to court. My partner, who owns the land jointly with me, is being taken to court by someone else. This person is saying that this bit of land is his, right? And I'm coming along. I can testify. Me and Joe Bloggs down the road, we can testify together that it's absolutely not yours and it's his. Now that obviously I'm stand to gain, right? Because we haven't split the land yet, so we both jointly own it. So if you lose, I lose. So I want to testify for you, don't I? So that can't be right. So Gemora says, "Skin," and we have to do what's called an okimta. An okimta is where the Gemora has the only way the Gemora has a certain Aramaic word, okim, to fit it in. So it means, right. Chaim must be related to the Hebrew of hakim, to establish. The kimta is where we have no other way, basically, of solving the question unless we say it's talking about a specific scenario, and through doing that, the question is dissolved. You understand? The Gemara does this all the time, but it's important to understand the methodology. Ideally, we would give an answer in a way that we don't have to do that. We don't really want to squeeze the Mishnah, squeeze the statement of Shmuel into a particular scenario and saying, well, he must be talking about this case. We're using a kimta, we have no choice. We're stuck. You understand? We've got a problem. How are we going to resolve it? The only way we can resolve it is we have to say that Shmuel was talking about this particular scenario. You follow? Right. Gemora says, the case is, Shmuel was talking about where he wrote to him that I don't have any din udvarim on this field. What does that mean, din udvarim? It means that I don't have any involvement, any interest in the field at all. So he's removed himself from the field completely. It's a bit of a... Yeah, exactly. Well, effectively, he's removed himself. Yeah, exactly. And that's how he can testify. Now, look at Rashbam, the third Rashbam, right? Third line. The person who's testifying writes to this machzik, the person who's in the holder field. I don't have any law, any din udvarim means like law or words, right? I don't have with you in the entire field. And even on my part, everything belongs to you. Nothing belongs to me. It all belongs to you. This is the implication. The implication is that I won't have any claim. I will not have I should not have any claim on this field. He's dealing with the language. The way of the Chachomim is to say, I don't have in place of I shall not have. Really means I shall not have, not I don't have, because he does, factual, right? But he's saying I shall not have. I doesn't want it, right? And therefore, and the Rashbam comes back to that later on, this language thing. Therefore, since he's given him his portion, he can testify on it. He's not neger be'edus. So the Rashbam's obvious question is, we could have just answered a very simple way. He gave it away. He was makner to him. Why do we have to use this unusual answer that he removes himself from the field? I've got no claim to the field. Just say he was makner to him. Yeah, he sold it to him, or he gave it to him. He made a kin, and he bought the rest of the field from him. Says the Rashbam, it's an extra chiddush lashmina to tell us to be chai gavna havi lashon atana. It's telling you an extra chiddush that in such a scenario it is a gift. This is the language of gift. That's correct. This is a way of gifting something. That's the chiddush. Okay, so what we're saying is like this. The answer of the Gemara is that he removes himself from the field. And because he removes himself from the field, because he has no interest in the field, therefore he's not neger be'edus, because he doesn't stand to gain, because he's removed himself from he's removed all interest. So therefore the question is, why is it that we have to tell a case where he's removed all interest, he's removed his all interest from the field? Why don't we just say the case is that he was maknet? He gave over his part through selling or well, no more than that. Being makner. Being makner is where the other guy is coin it from you. The other guy buys it from you, either through a gift or whatever, right?
What's the difference?
There is a difference. No, that's the point. There isn't really. In other words, the conclusion of the Gemara is there isn't. But the point is that we talk about a scenario where it's a chiddush because it's a lashon matana, it's a gift. The chiddush is that when you say to someone, I don't want to have any involvement in this field, what you are doing is you are expressing something which qualifies as a language of gifting. By saying, Einli Asek al Sodezu, Dinut Vorim Einli al Sodezu, I have no interest in this field, that is the same as giving something as a gift. That's what we're saying. And that's the extra chiddush we put in here. That even if you're not makner, he doesn't make a kinyan or anything, but just by saying, I don't want to have any involvement in it, that's the same as giving it over to him as being kohenet, right? Make sense?
The thing is, for the devious, it'd be a very good way of, their partners are very tight, right? So you have a nod and a wink, I'm going to recuse myself, and then I'll give it, and then later on you'll nod and a wink. Kind of
sounds like conspiracy.
It's a bit of a conspiracy. Yeah, it's kind of.
However, it may not be.
It may not be, but
it may be the only way they can the only way they can make sure the guy that's claiming it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, look, because of the Gemara's question on this, your problem will be resolved anyway, because the Gemara is going to say it's not good enough to do that. Okay. The Gemara doesn't quite say it because of what you're saying, that because of the plot, they may have made a plot between them. What we call a kanunya. They came up with this beautiful plan in order to what? It's kanunya. More use the word kanunya to mean a plan or plot. That they plotted together in order to keep the field, right? But the Gemara's got another problem. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. The language doesn't work, right? The Gemara asks, if he writes this to him, what difference does it make? Does it make a difference? Does it help? Well, Tanya, the Brisa says, a person says to his friend, I have no interest, that's Din Dvarim, on this field. And I have no involvement in it. Okay. And my hand is removed from it. So that's all languages that mean the same thing. Basically, he has said nothing. His language is meaningless. Yeah, it doesn't help. Make a difference. It doesn't help. So therefore, the Gemara has to answer, you have to say, they made a kinyan. He made a kinyan, right? The other guy, I was actually koinet, right? It was actually koinet. That's what's going on. He actually acquired it, made a kinyan. And that's how you remove ownership from it. Okay? You remove ownership from it.
So they're not actually partners at that point.
Yes, correct. Now, this is what happens. This is what happens, right? The Gemara is going to now go on to the next stage of the Gemara is going to be, even if I don't own it, I still have an interest, which is what we're going to go on to next. I still have an interest. I still wanted you to keep it. Why? Because if you keep it, the person who's claiming a Baal Chov from me, someone I owe money to, yeah, if I make sure that you hold on to the field, he can claim it from you. So that's the next stage of the Gemara. The first step of the Gemara has been like this, right? How can I testify about a field that I jointly own with you? Clearly, I have a monetary interest in the field. If we jointly own it, that means if it's taken away, I lose like you lose, right? And the Gemara says the case is where he actually bought it fully. He bought you out before you testified. Okay, fine. Problem is, I still have a secondary monetary interest in the field. Why? Because if I borrowed money from someone, yeah, right. If I borrow money from someone, before the field was, before I before I disposed of my interest in the field, then the Baal Chov, right, the creditor, yes, the creditor can go to claim the field for the in lieu of the debt. He's allowed to do that, right?
That's not an arm's length purchase sale, is it? That's a sale deliberately done to get himself out of his debt. Mm.
Well, okay, but that's a different problem. That's a different problem. That's the whole point. Okay, there's a halakhic system designed to prevent you doing that. So that because of that problem, right? That's right. Your karka, your land becomes, as Paul said, meshubah to a Baal Chov, right? The land that you buy, that you can't subsequently, any land that you own at the time the debt is made. So you borrow the money from someone, your land that you own is automatically enslaved to the person you owe money to.
Yes, if you manage to sell it.
Yeah, exactly that.
You never really dispose of it because there's a residual.
Well, I did record it anyway.
Well, you have disposed of it, but there is still a benefit to you on him holding on to it. And that's why you testifying for him serves your interests.
Why? It goes to another person.
Then you won't be able to claim any. How will you be able to claim it? Yeah, because that person.
I thought you could still claim it if you sold it. I thought
No, because they are claiming, the person is coming along and claiming that it was never yours. Remember, what are you doing here? You're testifying and defending the ownership of the field from someone else who is claiming full ownership. So obviously that will defeat the creditor. It's got a bit confusing. Yes. Reuven and Shimon buy a field jointly. Yeah. Okay. Then Reuven takes out a loan. Then Reuven sells his interest to Shimon. Right? Then Yehuda comes along and says, you know that field that you jointly owned? You used to jointly own and now Shimon owns entirely. That was mine. You stole it. That was never yours, that field. Now, obviously, if Yehuda wins, right, then obviously if Yehuda wins, then obviously the field is something that the creditor can take from because it was stolen property well before he made the loan.
Yeah, so you were going to win. All right, very cool.
Very good.
Do you understand? Do you understand? He's not allowed to, he wouldn't. And that's why it serves your interest to keep the field there. You tell me why. Why does it serve my interest? Who cares? Who cares? What?
It's worth money.
Who does? Yeah, I've got my money anyway. I don't have the money. That money's gone, by the way, obviously. Otherwise, obviously the debtor could come, the money I got from the sale to Shimon is obviously gone. That's gone on the yacht. No, then he could take the yacht. But whatever, it's gone. It's gambled away. There's nothing left, right? Okay. It's off with the fairies. Yeah. Now that is, so the question you still ask me is, okay, fine, but it's not a direct benefit, because what do I care? Let's say the creditor can't claim his money. So what? So why do I care? Okay, I've got nothing. Can't claim anything. Sorry. If you lend money to someone and they have nothing and they don't own anything and they own no property and the credit card can't own anything, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? Well, you go bankrupt, you go to the court, there's procedures, whatever it is. You're not my problem. I mean, it is. But what?
No?
What?
Terrible, you become a slave.
Okay, well,
From a loan? Yeah.
no, Ganav is. No. We don't enslave people who are
Debtors.
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 Ganav, he's not a Ganav. He just didn't pay back his debt. I don't think so. Anyway, the answer is very simple. It's a pasuk in Mishlei. Rashbam brings. It says, Lova Rosha below Yishalim. A Rosha is someone who borrows and doesn't pay. So it's a massive interest for him. He doesn't want to be a Rosha. Doesn't want to be a Rosha. A Rosha is someone who borrows money and doesn't pay it back. So he doesn't want to be a Rosha. So of course it's my interest to testify that the field belongs to Shimon, because that will enable my creditor to claim from it, which I want. Why do I want that? Because I don't want to be he doesn't want to be a Rosha. He doesn't want to have a debt. He doesn't want to have taken a debt, and not, that's clearly a benefit. So how can I testify? You with me? That's what the Rashbam asks. Look at the. Well, let's see the few lines of the Gemara, then we'll go back and see all the Rashbams together. He says, right? You with me? Back it's still in the Gemara. The when he acquired it from him, my havi, what does that make a difference? He's establishing it in front of his creditor. The Hama Rovin Bashmuel Mishmei de Shmuel, because Rovin Bashmuel said the name of Shmuel, a person who sells a field to his friend, Shaloba Achrayas, that means to say, even if you sell a field without Achrayas, what is Achrayas? Achrayas means the guarantee. That's what Achrayas, right? If you sell a field, Shaloba Achrayas means there was no guarantee. That means I sold you a field and you don't have any recourse to me if someone removes it from you. So obviously, even if you sell a field without guarantee, and Kol Shekain, Kal V'chomer if you sold it with a guarantee, because then obviously it's you want to keep it, otherwise he's going to go and claim it back from you, right? But even if you sold it without a guarantee, you understand? If you sell a field to someone with a guarantee, what's a guarantee? Guarantee means that if someone takes the field away from you, one of my creditors, I've got to pay you back. So obviously then I'm going to I'm disqualified from testifying, because otherwise I'm going to have to pay you, right? So, but even if it's Shalom Achrayas, I sold your field without any guarantee, there's no recourse, you have to come back to me, still, Ein Meid Lo Aleo, I cannot testify. He is not allowed to testify. He's disqualified from testifying if someone else tries to claim that the field is his. Because by testifying and keeping it in Shimon's hands, I am establishing the field in front of my creditor. I'm keeping it present and correct for my creditor to claim from. And that's a material benefit to me, because otherwise that person is going to become a Rosha through not paying back his debts. Okay? Okay, so I think Gemara is going to answer that, but that's where we are so far with the questions.
Sounds like people are prepared to do all sorts of wrong things, but they want to be known as a Russian.
That's true. Yeah, don't want to be known as a Russian. Yeah.
You get away with it, but you'll always be known.
So,
Avoid being a Russian.
So one second. So, okay, let's just see the answer to the Gemara. The Gemara answers this question by saying the following. Skin on this is what we're dealing with. The Kobel Alei Achrayas, where he accepted responsibility, accepted a guarantee. That means to say that this partner accepted Achrayas, he gave him a guarantee when he sold it to him, right? When he sold it to him, right? So the Gemara asks, what does that mean? What does that mean? Achrayas demand. What guarantee? If you're saying that when Reuven So remember, Reuven and Shimon are the joint owners, and he sells his part to Shimon. So Shimon now owns all of it, right? So if you're going to say that when he's made the sale to Shimon, he took upon himself achrayas da'alma, that means if anyone else from the rest of the world comes along and claims ownership, I guarantee to pay you back the value of my half of the field. That's what it means. That's achrayas da'alma. He takes upon himself when he makes the sale. He signs a contract that if it's a dodgy sale because someone else owned it or whatever, I'm gonna reimburse you. Yeah, you with me? That's what it means, right? How much more so denichale? How much more so denichale? He's going to be happy. What does it mean? He's going to be happy?
Doesn't have to pay back.
Pardon?
He's resisting a claim on the title, so that he's not going to pay out.
Yeah, how much more so? Kol shekain denichale. How much more so denichale? He's going to be. It's happy. He's pleased with what? We're defending it because otherwise, I'm going to have to pay out, right? So obviously, I definitely should be disqualified from testifying if you losing it is going to make me have to pay you back. We're talking about where he accepts upon himself a guarantee of anything which comes through him. Through him. That means when we made the sale, when Reuven sold his half of the field to Shimon, so that Shimon now has the whole field, he signed a contract. And in that contract, it said that if my creditor comes along, just my creditor comes along and takes the field away from you, he pledges to reimburse him for that loss. So now it's very clever. Now he is able to testify if someone else claims ownership of the field. Why? Because he has no material benefit from giving this testimony. Yeah. Because it makes no difference. It makes no difference because what do we say the material benefit is? He doesn't want to have to borrow money and not pay back. He would call the Russia for doing that, right? Okay, that's the material benefit in keeping it in Shimon's hands. But in this scenario, what has he done? He's already committed to pay Shimon back. So all that will happen is Mr. Creditor coming along and saying, "Hey, you borrowed money from me. I'm going to go and get that field." So okay, fine. Let's say he does that. He goes and takes the field, and then what? And I'm going to have to pay Shimon because Shimon's going to be the creditor instead. So all that's going to happen is creditor A is replaced by creditor B. That's what I've got to do. I'm going to pay B instead of A, and therefore I don't gain. There's no net benefit to me with testifying, right? That this field belongs to you or used to belong to us, and not to Yehuda. There's no benefit. Right, you understand? There's no benefit in that testimony because either way, I'm going to still be in the same position. Beforehand, we understood that there's a material benefit. Material benefit is as long as Shimon holds onto the field and my creditor comes along later and takes it away, I'm happy because I pay back my creditor, right? So therefore, it's a great interest for me. Here, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference because even if I testify and keep the field in Shimon's hands, right? All that means is my creditor will be able to take it, which he will do. And then I'll owe them, and then I'll owe Shimon the same debt.
He's got an interest in testifying.
Why? What's the interest in testifying?
No?
Remember, the only interest he has in testifying, this is a secondary interest. You have to remember it's a secondary interest, right? I'm not getting a material benefit as such, because what benefit am I getting? I've sold it to Shimon already, it's all gone. The only benefit I'm getting is that I won't have a debtor on me, which is a person who's a Russia because he's not paying back a debt, right? But in this case, I'm not doing that. I'm not getting that benefit because I'm going to have to pay Shimon back instead of the creditor.
This is a different kind of a first. You might seem to be saying that there's two kinds of a first.
Correct.
It's a standard of first.
Yeah, that's right.
Full liability.
Correct. There's a full and partial liability. So when you sell something to someone, you can accept full liability. Full liability means it doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference how you lose it. You pledge to reimburse them, right? There's something called, there's a different type of liability, which is the second type we're describing here, where he accepts liability only if the liability comes through something he has done. So let's say you want to buy something from someone, and you know that this guy you're buying the land from is a bit of a dodgy guy, and you know that he's had past shady business dealings, or he's got himself into debt before. And therefore, when you buy the piece of land from him, you with me? Yeah. You make a condition. You're a clever and sensible businessman. So you say, okay, I'm happy to buy this land from you, right? It's a good piece of land. I want it. I can rear my cows on it. However, I know that you might have taken out loans, right? And I'm worried about that. So therefore, I make you sign that in the event that a creditor comes along, from you, yes, that you will pay me back. You will pay me back.
If it comes from left field.
Yeah, then I'm not accepting your responsibility. And that you can understand how that deal would be done. Because Reuven wants to sell Shimon a piece of land. Okay, Reuven wants to Shimon, or in this case, they were partners, and Shimon wants to buy out Reuven, right? But Shimon knows that Reuven's a bit dodgy. But he's not really worried about someone coming from elsewhere. He's not worried about someone coming from. His concern only surrounds Reuven. So Reuven says, look, I know why you don't want to buy this field from me, because you know I'm a bit dodgy. So I will protect you. I will protect you. We will put a clause in the contract that protects you from any harm that comes from me and anything I may have done, any secret debts I may have taken out.
Struggling to understand what else could there be. You're buying a piece of land from Reuven. And Reuven gives you a guarantee. It says anything that comes through me. What else is there that's not going to come? What other challenges could there be that are not going to be?
And also, what is
Because if Reuven's giving the piece of land, then surely anything coming and challenging that Reuven's title is a challenge on Reuven and coming through Reuven.
he's not being upfront about the conventional credit. What is the contract as well?
So what do you mean? I'd say again?
So I'm saying if this guy's not, he's saying
Yeah.
and he is not being upfront about the potential creditors that he's got against him, secret creditors, which he obviously hasn't disclosed because otherwise he would say they're putting in the contract. What gives the contract? So if he's not being honest in the first place, why can you expect to be honest?
Well,
in the breach.
well, it's not that it's not that it's not that he's not being honest. He puts the clause in to get the deal through. Meaning, Shimon says, "I don't want to buy you out." Right? Shimon and Reuven jointly own a piece of land. Again, we think of a piece of land like a little strip of land, right? That's like a little bit in a field, because we think of like that. Don't think of that. Think of the Shard or something like that. Think of a major office building, and we jointly own it. And Shimon's happy to buy out Reuven, but he's worried that maybe Reuven has secretly taken on a debt. So he puts this clause in the contract.
See, so it's not really definitely has something to say.
Shimon's lawyers, think of it like this. Shimon's lawyers say, Shimon,
Right.
this is great. You're going to own the building entirely, right? But you need to protect yourself. And how are you going to protect yourself? You're going to put a clause in the contract which says, right, which protects you.
My question is slightly different, which is that you're saying you're protected if the claim comes through Shimon, but what other claims could there be outside which are not?
So there could be all sorts of things. There could be, Rashwan will explain, but basically you can have someone coming along and saying, this field belonged to my ancestors. This is my ancestral field. The claim we've always had. No, that's nothing to do with it. Reuven and Shimon jointly bought a piece of land, and at some later date, once Shimon has bought it, Levi comes along and says, that field that you originally had, that big office building in town, that was really built by my ancestors, and I'll prove it to you.
So they may not have done anything wrong, we just acquired it in good faith.
Correct, yeah. Exactly. And Reuven will legitimately say to Shimon, listen, Shimon, we want to do a deal here, right? But I'm prepared to indemnify you, right? Yeah. Against anything that might come through me. I did do a law degree a long time ago. I have an LLB honors degree. So I do remember some things of it, right? The hardest bit was contract law. That was the hardest bit. It was at Open University, so I had to study all my stuff from books. I was in Yerushalayim, mostly doing smooth during the day. In the evening, I did a lot of. Anyway, so a long time ago. So he's going to indemnify you against things to me. But Reuven says, I'm not prepared to sign I'm not prepared to sign indemnity from anything. That's exposing myself to major risk. And Shimon will be happy to swallow that because he's not really worried. His lawyers have done their due diligence. They know where they know the origins of this building. They've checked the land surveys and everything. Do you understand? He's not really worried about someone coming along and claiming, someone comes in from America. Oh, by the way, that was my ancestors 300 years ago. You understand? He's not worried about that. It's rochok. It's not something that concerns him. What concerns him is Reuven. So that's why it's a very plausible scenario.
Yeah.
But the point is what we've done is we found a situation, a scenario when a partner, a shutuf, is allowed to testify on behalf of another shutuf. Okay? And that is when the shutuf does not stand to gain from that testimony. How can that be? Two things have to be the case. Number one, he doesn't own it anymore. He's sold it, right? Number two, he's written an indemnity clause, which means that the creditor, right, which is the way he would stand to gain by keeping it in Shimon's hands, because a creditor could then come and claim it, but he signed an indemnity clause that creditor A will just be replaced by creditor B, Mr. Shimon, who's now in the land. And therefore, I'm not gaining at all. I'm not gaining by keeping it with you, because in the event that creditor takes it, I'll still be a Rasha, because you understand, someone else will come and take it.
This is his partner, he has to indemnify that.
Yes, that's correct. It's the partner. Well, it was his partner. It's the partner. Yeah, because the partner's buying it. But the point is, that's how you'll have a scenario where there is there's no material benefit to Shimon through his edus. The edus it doesn't belong to you, Yehuda. It belongs to Shimon. And we thought, well, that's a major benefit to Reuven, because that means his creditors can come along and take it, and he's no longer a Rasha. The answer is he will still be a Rasha, because he's going to have to pay Shimon back, and he doesn't have any money for that either.
That presupposes that both of those two creditors are going to enforce in the same way. So,
Well, there isn't really two creditors. It's a bit confusing. There's only one creditor, just that Shimon will become the creditor. You know, so Reuven and Shimon jointly own the land. Shimon wants to buy a Reuven. And that's what he does. He pays money and he buys that Reuven. Okay. Now, once he's done that, he is now sitting in the land and he owns it completely. Reuven, though, if he has a creditor, that creditor, because it was a loan he took out, okay, before he sold his interest. So the borrower he's got a first charge on the land. You understand? He's allowed to claim first before he's allowed to take it away from the person who buys it afterwards. Make sense?
Yeah.
And that is something which is a major benefit to Reuven, because he doesn't want to have that debt anymore. Okay. But there will be a scenario, which is what we're explaining, right? Where actually it doesn't absolve me of any debt, because I'm going to have exactly the same debt now to Shimon, because of the indemnity clause, I'm going to have the same debt to Shimon. Does that make sense? Do you understand?
That's what I'm saying.
Well, does that answer your question, or you were getting at something else? You got two.
Yes, it does. I mean, it's more. My point was really, and may have misunderstood it, but you may have been interested in how the two personalities that are there. But it sounds like there aren't two personalities. You might one person might enforce it more harshly than the other person.
If the other person chooses to enforce it, then the law can't legislate.
You and the witness might prefer one over the other.
Ah, right.
You see what I mean? So it's more your preference. So you could your testimony to favour one person over the other.
Ah, that's a very good question. Now that's a very good question. That is called in the Gemora, Harishon Hasheni Noachli. No. 1 second. Hasheni Noachli Harishon Kosher Mimenu. The Gemora discusses, I think, at the end of Ksubas. That means I prefer the second guy, right? And the first one I really don't like, which is why I'm happy to testify for it, in that case, to move hands to someone else, because he looks like a really wimpish guy. And I'm happy to, and then he does have something to gain. So Jeremy's question is, there's still an interest in testifying, because what? He's going to keep it in Shimon's hands, and then what? Shimon's easy to deal with.
Yes.
All right, Shimon's easy. He knows Shimon. He's known him for years. He used to be partners together.
Family, he'll go easy on him.
Exactly.
Whatever.
He'll go easy on him rather than the creditor.
No, he keeps in Shimon's hands, then he's
Rather than the creditor.
Whichever way, either way.
Can't be that, must be other.
All the way around.
Well, no, if he doesn't like the creditor, then he's better keep it.
They could choose.
No, he's better to Shimon.
If he wants to defeat the predator.
Let the creditor. Yeah, if he's got a preference, then he's got an interest.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I can't want to go which preference, but he's got an interest.
It's quite hard to legislate for that.
Well, it is.
And I'm not alive.
No, it's a good question, yeah. Although I'm just wondering whether it would work here.
The Gemora, I presume, doesn't mention that.
No, not that question. Not that question, but it does elsewhere. It does elsewhere. I'll tell you where it mentions it. It mentions it in a case where someone, yes, a similar case where someone testifies for someone else, and the concern is that it's in his interest that he should get to number two. That's where a second person claims ownership, and you get up and may it. You testify that actually the second person owns it or is entitled to it because you want him to have it because it's better for you because he's easier to deal with. That's the point. That's the case. That is the case. 1 second. The type of question that someone must ask, I think. Doesn't want to be a thief. Don't know. It's a good question. I'm not sure what the answer is. Yeah, I'm not sure what the answer is. It must be something to do with it's not the same as a case where you're selling it on to someone else. Where you're selling it on to someone else, we're worried you can say, I prefer the other guy. Here, what's the difference? A debt is a debt. Debt is a debt. Yeah, it's a fair question. So I'm not exactly sure why it shouldn't apply. But it must be something to do with the fact that the debt is a debt anyway, so it's not enough of a benefit, if you like. You know, the debt is a debt. At the end of the day, you still have to pay it back. So, yeah. Okay, let's see the Rashbam on everything we've done. It's quite a lot. Let's see if we can get through it. My hobby. So the Rashbam is like, yeah, it's about 10 lines down. My hobby. What's the difference? We said. What is the difference with if you say this? If you write this language, it doesn't work. It's not the language of a gift. He's still Neger Be'edus. He's still got a vested interest in the testimony. A person who says to his friend, who's his partner, I should not have any involvement in it. By inference, you hear, you listen, you understand. Everything should be yours. He didn't explicitly state this, didn't come out of his mouth, right? But the implication is, I'm not going to have any involvement, implying what? Right? Everything should be yours. And he says, my hand should be removed from it. He said nothing. So in all these cases, it doesn't work. Why? Because since he already owns part of the field, and he says, I shouldn't have a portion in it. That's not the language of giving a gift to someone else. It's like a prayer. If only I shouldn't have a portion, a part of this field. If only I shouldn't have a part in this field. And as long as he hasn't said this field should be given to you, it has not left his possession. The language does not work. It only works this idea of I don't have any interest in it, which means it's something if you haven't yet taken ownership of. And he makes a condition that it should not be his when the time comes that he is destined to get the thing. Because a person can't be zoicha, can't take hold of something ownership-wise against his will. because the Chaim Pirkin was going to say later on in Daf Mem Tes, and Ksubas as well, an inheritance which is coming to a person after a certain amount of time must not allow Shelo Yershena. He can make a condition not to inherit it. So the Rashbam, the Gemara's question is focused on the language. If I own something, it's on the language. If I own something now, right, and I say, I don't have any interest in this, it's meaningless because you do. You already own it. That helps if it hasn't yet come to my possession. So let's say he has a very elderly relative who is about to die, and he hasn't yet taken ownership, and he makes a statement. I don't want any ownership in this. I don't know, it's something to do with his tax affairs. He doesn't want to take ownership of it, right? So he makes a statement like that. That's okay, because if that works for something I haven't yet taken ownership of. You say, Dinner dvarim ainli esek, yodi, my hands are removed from it. All of these phrases, which basically means I want no interest in this, right? But that only works if I haven't yet got it. But if I'm already holding it, it's meaningless. It's meaningless. It's like a tefillah. I wish I didn't, but you do. You understand? It's like, you can make a preliminary statement like that. Like, this thing I don't want anything to do with. But once you've got it, it doesn't work, right? And in fact, because you're actually owning it now, when you say I don't have a portion in it, we don't translate that as a gift to the other guy. We just translate it as a wish. If only I didn't have an ownership of it, right? But you do, so it's not going to help you, right?
Can you just say it's not?
No, that's something else. You didn't do that. You didn't do that. So that's similar to what we're going to say, because we're going to say he's actually koineh. He makes a kinyan. That's something else. He makes a method of direct acquisition. That's something else, right? Aval mikivan shekvar dova sheloyu, since the thing is already owned by him, and he says it should not be mine. Lo maklum, he said nothing. Because it's going to be his against his will. As long as he doesn't give it to someone else, right? This is how the interpretation of the Gemara seems to me, and this is the main way of understanding it. And this is how it's clear from later on in the parak that this is what it means. Totally different pshat. Some explained that this is the reason why he hasn't said anything. He says, I do not have any interest. But he doesn't say, I should not have. He's being deceitful, he's just lying. He does have a portion. The Rashbam's second explanation is that the problem with the language is saying, I don't have. You do have. It's a falsehood, you do have. If you would have said, I don't want to have, that's something else. You didn't say that. You said, I don't have, and you do. He says this is an incorrect explanation. The Gemora, because this is not the language of the Gemara, to say in any place, lo yehei. The Gemara doesn't use this phrase, lo yehei, I should not have. It uses the phrase, I don't have, like he said above. That's the way the Chachamim speak, but it doesn't mean, it means I don't want to have. It doesn't mean I don't have now. And this is clear later on, the Kamashani, because the Gemara answers, this is what we're dealing with, when he acquires it from him, makes a kinyan, and he doesn't answer, Ba'omer lo yehei. And he doesn't answer that the scenario is where he says, I should not have, right? Right? Because in other words, Rashbam is saying like this, if this explanation was correct, that the fault is only the language, in other words, it would work to remove himself from it if he said, lo yehei, I don't want to have, instead of saying, I do not have, right? Then the Gemara should give a very simple answer. Why come on to kinyonim and everything else and konim? Just say that you said the right phrase, right? The Gemara's answer, therefore, the Rashba doesn't like the explanation. Fine. So the Gemara, we're going with the pshat that the language doesn't work because it only works for something you haven't yet taken ownership of. Something you have taken ownership of, this method doesn't work. The Gemara answers, so what must be the scenario? That means shutav chaveroi, his friend, the partner, Konami Odo, he acquired from him the kinyan suda, with a kinyan suda, which is a kinyan chalipin. That means when you take a cloth and you make a kinyan on it, and now that there's a kinyan, the condition helps. Now this phrase, Konami Odo, is a very important phrase to understand. This is the phrase the Gemara uses whenever it wants to talk about what we call a kinyan chalipin. We just call it a kinyan for short, right? The way you sell your chometz, the way you do kiddush before commit yourself to what's in the ksuba. Yeah, the way it's done is that the person who is committing themselves lifts up an item, okay, an item, And through his making a kinyan, that's what he's doing. He's acquiring it, making a kinyan on that item. He is mechayev himself to something else. He obligates himself to something else, right? Make sense? So it's kela in norm. We pass as a machlokas in both Metzia how it works. We pass on la halacha that you use kela of shel koina. You have to use the item which belongs to the person who's acquiring the thing, the person who's making the acquisition, the person who's sort of gaining, so to speak, right? So in the chometz scenario, which I always feel is not such a great example because there you're making the rov into a shliach, so it's not such a great example. But basically, what's happening is in the lomdus of kinyonim, the rov is gaining something because you're appointing him as a shliach. He's not actually acquiring your chometz, but he is acquiring the, I guess, the rights to sell your chometz for you, and therefore you lift up an item like a pen or a scarf or a cloth, right? That is owned by the rabbi, and when you lift that up, what that does is that obligates you to give something else in return.
So you're not acquiring his rabbi's
basically. You are. And then you immediately give it back. That's okay. I'll take a kiddushin example. That's easier, right? So before the ksuba is signed, right, you have to do the kosan does the kinyan. What's going on? He uses so all the cases are complicated, but basically he uses a pen or a scarf that is owned by one of the edim, who are effectively representing the color. That's how it works. They're representing the color because in the ksuba it says the phrase v'konino, and we acquired from the chosan. We made a kinyan from the chosan, and then they sign, right? So they're representing the color. He takes the pen that belongs to the edim, acquires it, albeit temporarily, but he makes a proper kinyan on it. That's what he's doing. He's acquiring it. And through the act of acquisition, he is then mechayev, which is the same as being makna. He's mechayev himself. He obligates himself, because it's like a swap thing. He obligates himself to his duties as expressed in the ksuba. That is the lomdus of kinyan. There's a whole complicated lomdus behind it. It's hard to explain to, especially to the uninitiated groom who hasn't kind of like he's not so familiar with the halachic intricacies. He's trying to explain all this 5 minutes before the chuppah. What he's doing, it's a bit tricky. But if you think about it, it is a system and a logic of barter. That's a barter logic. Do you understand? It's a barter. That's what it is. Kinyan. We translate it kinyan chalipin as barter. It is barter. That's what I'm doing. You're acquiring something, and we say through the benefit that you're getting by acquiring this, and it doesn't matter that it's just a token, because it doesn't matter, because it's still a barter procedure. You understand? So through making this kinyan, you are then you give over something else instead. Genuinely. Right? And that's what it means. Kishakonu miyodo. What does it mean, kishakonu miyodo? It means, and it's used in the plural because because it's like the plural, like it's in Adim. It means they are kona from the hand of the shutaf, right? They are kona from him. Shutaf chavera konu miyodo, right? Okay, because konu miyodo means that the shutaf, the other guy, he acquires from him the kinyan suda, right? Okay, how does that work? That means that he acquired the land through Reuven taking ownership of something belonging to Shimon. So Shimon would give his pen to Reuven because Shimon is the kona. Yeah, Shimon is the making the acquisition here. He would give his pen to Reuven. Reuven would make a kinyan on the pen, right? And then the land would go to Shimon. Right? That's how it works. Kinyan Suda. That's okay. That is a kinyan. That is how it works. So that's how it works. Says the Rashbam. So what if he makes a kinyan? How can he testify to keep the field in his hand? He's still conflicted with this testimony. He wants the land to remain in the hands of the partner. Because then the person, Ruvain, who used to own the land with Shimon, who's giving it to Shimon, is ensuring that it remains clear and present in front of his creditor. If he has any creditor that he lent money to, so he borrowed money from, who lent him money, before he was makna the rest of the field to Shimon, his portion was makna to his friend. In other words, for Reuven was makna to Shimon his portion. Shola besoda that he had in the field. The creditor will come and snatch it away. Because half of it was enslaved to Reuven. Was enslaved to the creditor of Reuven. And then the person, Reuven, who's giving away his half of the field, will benefit because he will be free of his creditor, and he won't be defined as a person who's wicked because he borrows money, doesn't pay back. As we say later on in our Gemora. And that is a material benefit. It's a material benefit for me to be free of my creditor. You understand? Because not being a Rasha, right? Because if they took it away from this person with witnesses, so let's say he didn't stand up and testify for Shimon, which is what we're saying he can do, what would happen? Yeah, they would take it away with witnesses. Yehuda would come along and say, this was never yours. Sheyomru, that they would say, right? Shelo hoya le'elu shutfin chelek bo. If they would take it away with witnesses, Sheyomru, they would say, Shelo hoya le'elu shutfin chelek bo, who would say that these partners never had a portion in it. They never owned the field at all. Lo yuchel bal chof shelo likvos imeno. The creditor obviously would not be able to claim from it. So he'd be a wicked person who borrows money, doesn't pay back. I explained this before. If Yehuda wins in his claim that he says it always belonged to my ancestors, then the whole thing is out the window. The creditor's got nowhere to go because it was never yours in the first place. Before you borrowed the money, it was never yours. The principle of borrowing money and land becoming enslaved to a creditor is the land that I own at the time of the loan. If I never owned this land, if it was all a dream, if it was all imaginary, because really it's been proven subsequently that the land was owned by Yehuda's great-grandfather, right? Then my creditor has no right to that land. You understand? If I think I own the Tower of London, right? But if I think I own the Tower of London, right? I might say that as much as I like. I might pretend I do. But clearly, if I have a creditor, that creditor cannot take away the Tower of London from the crown. Do you understand? Because I don't own it. It's a joke.
So you'll never be a Russian.
No, you will be a Russia because you did borrow the money. You borrowed the money, but the creditor has nowhere to go because I don't own the Tower of London.
Seems to you whether Reuben sells it to Shimon or not.
What was that?
If Yehuda's claim is justified,
Yes.
and it's justified whether or not Reuben sold the land to Shimon or not. So even though he's got,
If Yehuda's claim is justified, that what?
Reuben's got a bar chot,
Yes.
then it's irrelevant whether he sold the land to Shimon. We're only talking about.
No, we're only wondering whether he could be an aid or not.
Yeah.
No, we're talking about can he be an aid for Yehuda?
So that's the point.
Can Reuven serve as an aid for Shimon against Yehuda? That's the question. So we say no, Shalo Bachrais. We say he sold the field, Shalo Bachrais, without guarantee. Koshkin Bachrais, and how much more so with Bachrais. Sorry, this was the proof that a person who sells a field, Shalo Bachrais, even if he's no guarantee, but Koshkin Bachrais, how much more so with a guarantee, he can't testify. He can't join with another witness to keep it in the hands of the person he sold it to. Even if the lokech lost out, he wouldn't come, so he wouldn't be able to go back to the seller. Even if the buyer lost out, he won't be able to go back to the seller. And the reason is because he establishes it in front of his debtor, his creditor. Where he doesn't have any other land. Reuven doesn't have any other land. He doesn't have any other land, and therefore he wants to keep the field with Shimon, because otherwise he would be a person who borrows and is wicked for not paying back, right? He's not paying back, yeah? I feel bad that we have to stop, but I unfortunately have to finish on time because I've got to go. I've got to relieve my daughter's babysitting. I'm sorry. Forgive me. So although we did stop in the middle, which is a bit unfortunate, we'll have to get back over it again next time. Anyway, the next Shim is in 8th of January. There's no Shim in the next 2 weeks on the bank holidays. Apologies. By Mitzvah Hashem, we will resume then. And we'll go over it. It's a good sugya. Okay. All right.
Yeah.